So just a bit about myself. What I do normally, I work for a community development partnership in the employment services there. So my job is I'm employer engagement and training lead. So a big part of my job is training job seekers and doing one-to-one coaching with them, mostly around, excuse me, CVs, job searching techniques, interview techniques, doing mock interviews with them, things like that. And the other big side of my job is employer engagement. So developing relationships with employers, both to try and open up job opportunities to clients I deal with, but also to get feedback from employers as to what they're looking for from candidates in today's market. And included in that is what they're looking for from candidates when they go in for an interview, what makes for a good interviewee. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today is the interviews, so tips and techniques for interview success. So the kind of key points of today's presentation, I'm going to be looking at what do employers want in a candidate, then briefly looking at the structure of an interview, which I know a lot of people are familiar with, but a lot of clients I deal with maybe haven't had an interview in a really long time. Maybe they've never had an interview, or they're new to Ireland and they've never had an interview here, and people just don't know what to expect or where to even start preparing for it. So just to kind of look at that first of all. And then common interview questions and how to answer them. Obviously, we can't go into all interview questions, but there are a lot of key questions that come up a lot that will be very common in interviews. And that if you give your time to have a bit of think about these ones, it'll probably cover a lot of questions you could potentially be asked. And then finally, we're going to look at how to manage interview stress. So there's always going to be a little bit of stress. There's only, but there are certain things that you can do to try and reduce that as much as possible, things that are within your control. So we're going to look at that first point first. What do employers want in a candidate? So what employers want is they want to see, first of all, that you're tuned into their needs. So do you really understand what this job is and what they want? And if the job description is properly written out, it should be in there. So what are the tasks you're going to have to do in this job? What are the main bits of experience they want you to have? And usually they'll have some information in there about the personal characteristics they're looking for in somebody. Like they want somebody to be, work well as part of a team, somebody who shows initiative, somebody who's good at multitasking, that kind of thing. So you really want to spend a bit of time with the job description, read it thoroughly, go through it a few times. And I often find it helpful to literally, if you have it printed out, get a pen and underline the key points they say they're looking for, or to highlight that digitally if it's up on your computer screen, until you get a really clear idea of what are they looking for, what are these jobs, and the tasks I'm going to have to do, what are the experience they want me to have, what kind of characteristics are they looking for in the person. Because until you've got a really clear picture of what they're looking for, it's going to be hard to, sell yourself as such into that job in the interview. Employers also want you to show that you can fit into the company. So fit in culturally. So the way you get a feel for what type of company they are, first port of call will be looking on their website. Usually these days, as well as the company saying on their website the products and services that they offer, they'll often have information up there as well about their values, their mission, their ethos, all that kind of thing. So you can get a feel for the culture of a company often by reading the website. Another thing I would encourage people to do is, if you can, try and get a conversation with somebody that's already working in that company. So you may have a personal contact, even if it's a few steps removed. So it could be a friend of a friend of a friend that's working in that company. Try and see if you can get a telephone conversation with them or meet up with them. Or even if you don't know anybody that knows anybody that's working in the company, it's worthwhile, if you have a LinkedIn profile, even a basic LinkedIn profile, sending somebody that does work in the company, and preferably in the department you're going for, and if there's somebody else doing the same job you're going for, even better, and send them a direct message and just say, "Hi, my name is Tara, I've applied for, or I'm going for an interview for such and such a job in your company. I'd really appreciate if you had the time for a 5-10 minute chat on the phone." And they may not get back to you. And if they don't take it personally. It's probably just they got too many emails in. But often people do get back. And you can get such valuable information in a 5-10 minute conversation with somebody about what the role is like, what the company's like to work for, what are the good points, what are the challenges, information that you're not going to get in the company website. And also, when it comes to interview, if you can let them know that as part of your research, as well as reading up on the website, and I would also encourage you to put the name into Google, see if there's any recent media articles on the company. They could have information about mergers or expansions or whatever. And if you can bring up that in the interview and say that as part of your research, you looked on the website, you reached out to somebody in the company, that looks really good, that you went the extra mile and that you made the effort. And it looks like you're really interested in working for the company, which is obviously what they want. Then you need to be able to demonstrate you're the right person for the job. So you can have it really clear in your head, right? I've got a clear idea of exactly what they want, what this role is, what type of person they're looking for, the culture of the company. But you need to be able to communicate in an interview that you're the right fit for that. So you really want to think about how the skills and experience and characteristics that you have already map onto what they're looking for. And you also want to be able to communicate that in a clear, concise manner. So I would recommend you to literally, obviously you can't know exactly what questions they're going to ask, but the job description would give you a very good clue about what things they're going to ask you about. So I would literally write out answers to questions that they think they're going to ask you and practice saying them out loud, whether it's to yourself, to the dog, to somebody else in the house. Because you might have a think about the questions they're going to ask, come up with some ideas about, oh yeah, I have a few examples I could give of that. But if you don't practice saying them and you're not that used to interviews, you can get completely tongue-tied and it may not come out as you want when you're actually trying to articulate it. Or you end up rambling and going on for ages and kind of losing the thread of your thought, which, is frustrating for them and can be stressful for you. And the other thing they want is they want to see if you're genuinely interested in the position. So are you really interested in the role and really interested in the company? And that will come across, these kind of intertwine these points, because your interest will come across in you showing that you really get the job, that you really know what the company does, but also in things like your body language. Sit up straight, look alert, smile, make good eye contact, dressing smartly, making sure you arrive in plenty of time for the interview. All those things show that you're genuinely interested. There's nothing more off-putting than if somebody just looks like they're not really bothered and they, weren't even sure if they're going to bother coming. So, just be mindful of all those things when you go into the interview. Typical structure of the interview. So this is just an overview, but we will go into more detail about the different bits if I use any words that you're not familiar with. So your standard interview, you've got introductions. You walk in, they'll introduce you to everybody on the panel, tell you what people's title is. It's a good idea to try and get that information before you go into the interview as part of your preparation. And sometimes you will be sent that. So HR may often, if they send you the appointment for the interview, they'll tell you who's going to be interviewing you and what their roles are. Or they'll at least give you the names, and then you can look up on the website what those people's roles are so that you know who you're sitting in front of. And then it puts you in a better position to prepare questions for the panel afterwards, because they'll always ask at the end of the interview, have you got any questions? And they always recommend that you have a couple. And also it's good to know in advance which person is going to be your line manager, so you can kind of suss them out, because the interview is a two-way thing. You're also trying to decide, it's easy to go into the mode of wanting them to want you, but you also want to think, well, are these people I want to work with? That line manager sitting across from me, is that somebody I could see myself working with? The culture of this company, is this the right fit for me? The job description. So all of that research is part of preparing for the interview, and it's also part of you, I guess, getting your own head around whether or not that's the right fit for you. So yeah, the introductions, overview of your CV. So they'll often say, talk me through your CV or tell me about yourself. Then usually they'll go to competency or direct questions, which we'll look at what they are in a minute. And then at the end of the interview, as I said, they'll usually ask you, have you got any questions? So these will be some of the common questions that you will come across in interviews. So tell me about yourself is a very common one. And it sounds very easy, but it's actually one of the ones that people handle worse. The tendency is when somebody says, tell me about yourself, as they go back to when they left school, which could be 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, and say, well, I left school back in 19, whatever, and then I did this job, and I did that job, and that job. And they give their whole life story. That's not what the recruiters are looking for. They're looking for a 2 to 3 minute answer that looks at your main skills, experience, and qualifications that are relevant to the job. So everything you're going to say in this interview is relevant to what they're looking for. You might have loads of other jobs and experience on your CV over the years, but I wouldn't even bother, don't mention them, because you've only got so much time in the interview and people's attention spans aren't great. And if you give a huge amount of superfluous information, the key points that you want them to really get are likely to be lost. So, tell me about yourself. It's about 3 minutes. These are my key, often it makes sense to start with your most recent job because that might be the most relevant. So say, for example, if I was going for a job now as a project manager in a big tech company, I might say, well, a couple of years or 3 years ago, I completed my Prince 2 project management certification. And most recently, I spent the last 5 years working in such and such a company as a project manager. Prior to that, I spent 4 years working in, and it may be a project management role or it may not be, but it may have some skills and experience that are relevant to what they're looking for. So you would mention those things. And then say, for example, I had 5 years before that working as a junior chef. That's not really relevant to the role I'm going for. So I would literally skim over that and say, well, and for the 5 years before that, I worked as a junior chef. There's no point in giving them either repeating yourself or giving them information that's not relevant. So that's the tell me about yourself. And you can finish off that little, the answer to that one just by saying a couple of sentences about why you're interested, what you're interested in doing now. And you could say, but now I'm looking to build my career as a project manager in a tech company. The next question, why should we hire you? So with this one, you're basically saying, well, you're looking for this and I have that. So you're very much, kind of reading their job spec back to them in a way. You're saying, well, you're looking for this type of experience. And as you can see from my CV, I have 3 years of experience doing that in such and such a company. You're looking for these skills and I demonstrated that in my role in whatever. So it's very much matching what they're asking for and what you have. So by the time you're finished, you've basically pointed out to them what a good match you are. Then what's your greatest strength? So this is not an opportunity to just talk all about how great you are. Again, you're always thinking, okay, what strengths do I have and which one or two are most relevant to this job that I'm going for, what they want. So you're going to talk about that strength and give an example of how you used it in a previous employment to help the company or to help the employer. Then you've got what is your greatest weakness, which nobody really likes this question for fear of disqualifying themselves from the job. What you need to do with this one is, first of all, make sure you don't mention a weakness that's a key thing that you need to be good at for this new job you're going for. So if you're going for a job as a GP receptionist, you don't want to say, well, I'm not great at multitasking, because you're going to be dealing with a queue of people coming up to you, phone ringing, doctors over your shoulder giving you things to type. So you can either pick a weakness that you have now, but pick something that you're working on and tell them what you're doing to work on it. Or you could pick something from the past, even something that is relevant to this role, but that you've resolved. So, for example, you could say, well, I used to have part of this new role you're going for might be giving presentations. And you could say, I used to have a terrible fear about getting up and speaking in front of people. But so what I did then was I joined Toastmasters. And after a year with them, meeting the group every week, we had to get up and give presentations in front of each other. I got over my fear of speaking in front of people, and now I'm actually very comfortable with it and I enjoy it. So really, you're picking a weakness and saying what you did about it. Why do you want this role? So you're going to talk about what it is about the job spec, the company, and the culture of the company that really appeals to you and that you feel is a good fit for you. The next question, why do you want to work for us? So often when people are asked this, they answer why they want that role. But really this question is about why do you want to work for this company? And this is why it's so important to have done your research on the company, to have read their website, looked up articles about them, because if you don't really know anything about the company, how can you say why you really want to work for them? And you want to convince them that you want to really work for their company, because they're spending a lot of time, money, resources on recruitment. Companies do. Then they've got induction, they're training you up. There's a period of time of everybody getting used to you and you're fitting in with the team, and they want people that are there for the long haul and want to build a career there. Then the last question there, why did you leave your last job? So a lot of people are nervous about this one, and people have left jobs for very good reasons. I've dealt with clients that have been bullied or treated terribly by managers, or their working conditions were awful, or what they were being asked to do in their job is totally unreasonable, and they're a great employee. Nothing was their fault. But just bear in mind that these people sitting in front of you, interviewing you now, they don't know you. And you never want to give recruiters any cause for worry that, oh, God, if we take this person on, are they going to be a bit of a problem? Are they the problem? Are they a difficult person to work with? So you never want to say anything negative about a past job. So you could say, if you're working for a smaller company and you're now going for a multinational, you could say, well, I wanted to work for a bigger company because there are more opportunities. You could be coming from a large company, and this one you're going for now is a smaller company. You could say, I wanted to work for a smaller company where there'd be more variety for the role. You could say your company's known for, its innovation, and I wanted to be part of that. Or even practical things, like it's fine to say, I was dealing with a gentleman who's in his late 50s last week only, who's a chef, and he wants to change jobs because he just wants a 9 to 5 now. He doesn't want to. He said, at this stage of my life, I don't want to do evenings on weekends. I'm not able for it. And that's absolutely fine to give something practical like that. Or to say, well, look, my other job was an hour and a half commute each way from my home, and it's just not working, with family life. That's fine as well. You just don't want to ever say anything negative about the employer. So they were direct questions we looked at. So why did you leave your last job? Tell me about yourself. Competency-based, most interviews now are competency-based interviews. And competency-based questions just means that they're asking you to give an example of one of the competencies they want. So the competencies will be like things like teamwork, communication skills, initiative. So the questions will be all, give us an example of a time you showed your initiative. Give us an example of a time you showed that you work well as part of a team. Give us an example of a time you showed that you dealt with a difficult client. Whatever the things are, and you'll be able to tell the kind of things from the job description they need you to be good at. They want you to give an example of how you dealt with that well, a specific example of how you dealt with that in the past, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm great at that. Okay, so yeah, I've gone through some of the examples here already. So yeah, if one of their things is that you have to be really good at dealing with clients, so maybe you're going for a customer service job, they'll say, tell us about a time you had to deal with a difficult client or customer. If their company, if it's really important for them that you're results oriented, and they'll probably say that in the job description, it'll be, tell me about a time when you improved the way things were done on the job. That would be a similar question to showing initiative. You can see the teamwork there as well, problem solving, describe a time when you had to analyse a problem and generate a solution. So these are the kind of things you want to try and have some kind of a guess beforehand by looking at the job description. What things here are they saying that I need to be good at? They're the ones they're going to ask you. Give us an example of when you showed you were good at that in the past. So there's a particular structure for doing out these answers that you don't have to use, but it's a well-known technique called the STAR technique. And people do find it very helpful just for giving structured answers. Because we've done a lot of research on employers and what they want, and they say they really want structured, clear, concise answers where all the content is relevant. They don't want rambling or waffling and lots of irrelevant content. So to avoid that and to make the answers to those questions we just looked at, 2-3 minutes long, you can divide it into 4 parts. And we recommend that you actually write it out and then practice saying it. So if you were describing an example of a time you dealt with a difficult customer, the STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. So this was the scenario. I was working in Aer Lingus as an air hostess. The task or issue, we had a very irate customer because we'd lost our bags, whatever the situation was. Action, the action I took to resolve it. And make sure to use the word I. When people are used to working as part of a team, they'll say, well, we did this, and then we did that, and then the customer was grand. Make sure you say I, otherwise the employer will be wondering, well, what bit did you actually do, And then the result. And of course, you're only going to give an example where the result was positive and you were the hero at the end of the story. So this was the scenario, this was the issue or the task, this was the action I took, and this was the result. And if you kind of write it out in 4 paragraphs and practice saying it, you'll kind of have them in your backpack when you're going into the interview. So sometimes people would say, well, I can guess what they're going to ask me about, but I don't have examples of when I did that in a previous job. I don't have examples of when I showed initiative because the job I was in before didn't really allow for that. It was very procedural and I wasn't really given much freedom to do anything differently. The examples don't have to be from your past work background. They can be from paid work, it can be from voluntary work, it can be from an experience when you were in college, so you worked on a project as part of a team, that's teamwork, or it can be from your personal life. That's absolutely fine. The examples don't have to come from previous jobs. And just make sure to give a different example to each question. So you could have a story that shows that you have good communication skills and you're a team player and you have initiative, but you don't want to be rolling out that same story for 3 different questions. So prepare as many kind of stories as you can. Don't go into too much background detail when answering the competency questions. You just really need to give enough detail so that they understand what the situation was, what the issue was, what you did, and what the outcome was. That's it. And make your answers and examples you use the most relevant to the questions asked rather than the most impressive or elaborate, because it can be tempting if you have a great story about something that you did, that you really want to tell it, and it's not necessarily that relevant to the question. So give the answer that's most relevant to the question asked. Interviewee questions. So this is that end part of the interview. So you've got your introductions, then they'll kind of say, take us through your CV or tell us about yourself. Then they'll ask you some of those direct and some of the competency questions we looked at. And at the end, they'll always say, well, have you any questions for us? So this is also where your prep work comes in, because you may genuinely, having gone through the job description when you were preparing for the interview, or having gone through the job's website, or having spoken to somebody in preparation that works in the company, you may genuinely have questions that you want to clarify, such as, can you tell me more about this aspect of the job? Maybe it's not really that clear in the job spec. What exactly does that mean? Or how much of your job will that be? Would that be 50% of your job, or would that be a small part of your job? Because there might be some bit on there that you're not mad about and you don't want that to be half your role. Or you could ask them about the company plans, which again, that's information you'll only have if you do your research, if you look on their website, if you Google and see is there any recent articles about it. And that kind of thing will really impress, because most people don't go the extra mile. A lot of people send out a huge amount of job applications. They get called for an interview. They don't even remember applying for that job, and they just rock up. And it does come across in an interview if a person isn't that pushed about the job, or they don't really know anything about the company. And if that comes across, then they're not really confident that you really want to work there, that you're invested in staying. So they're less likely to want to invest in you. If you're really stuck, you can even ask things like, is this a new role? Obviously, if that information hasn't been clearly already given. You could ask how many are on the team I'm working with. If I'm successful in the interview, when will I know? I would always ask that at the end of an interview, because nothing worse than leaving and you've no idea when you're going to get an answer back or not. Another question you could ask is, you could ask the line manager, who will be there as one of the people anyway in the interview, what is your management style? Because you want a manager who's emotionally intelligent and who has a mentorship, supportive approach, who's interested in your well-being and your development. If you have a manager that's just interested in results, that's going to make for a pretty stressful work environment. So you can read the vibe in the room, but it is recommended that you ask that if that's something that's important to you. Managing interview stress. Excuse me. So it's very hard to completely eradicate stress, and it'll vary depending on what else you have going on in your life, depending on your own personality, all of those things. But there are certain things that you can do to try and minimize your stress as much as possible. So one is all the things we've been talking about. Make sure you're well prepared and that you've practiced your answers so that they come easier to you in the interview. The psychological research shows that when we're stressed, the frontal cortex of your brain, it doesn't work as efficiently at recalling information. So the more you've practiced answers, the more automatically it'll come. Because a lot of people think, oh God, what if I do all the preparation? I'll go into the interview and I'll just go blank. Well, that's less likely to happen the more you've prepared. The answers will be more on the tip of your tongue as such. Allow plenty of time to get to the interview. So don't leave it till last minute. Don't leave yourself short on time and find yourself running up from the bus or the train or wherever you've parked the car, and maybe you're not sure where the building is. And by the time you arrive into the interview, you're already stressed, and your body is already stressed, and your heart is already beating, and you're getting all these stress signals before you've even started. Try and leave yourself plenty of time to get to the interview. If you've no idea where the place is and you really want the job, it might even be worth going in the day before and just, making sure you know where the building is. Even if you can allow yourself enough time to go in and have a cup of tea in a cafe beforehand and just chill out, put away your interview notes, walk slowly to the interview so your system is as calm as possible, by the time you arrive. Your attitude you go in with as well. Friendly, open, enthusiastic, and just thinking to yourself, I've done whatever I've done at this stage in terms of preparation. It's going to go however it's going to go, and it's all good practice, basically. Because otherwise, if you get over-invested in the outcome of that interview, you just wind yourself up more and end up more stressed and performing not as well. So, just try and manage your own mindset of, look, what's meant for me won't pass me by. It's all good practice. I've done whatever prep I've done. Go in and be friendly, open, enthusiastic. And recruiters value a person's disposition as much as their skills and experience. And the research shows that over and over again. Even if you're not dealing with clients, you're going to be dealing with colleagues. You're going to be dealing with them. So it's so important that you just come across as having a nice personality and decent communication skills, which means being good at listening as well as talking. Some people talk an awful lot and they say, oh, I'm great with people, but there's actually the listening half of it as well. So that's as important as anything else. And, you could have somebody else in there that has more relevant skills or experience and they don't come across as at all friendly, and you could actually end up having the edge on them. So be mindful of that. And sometimes automatically, if we're nervous, you can tend to shoulders hunch or avoid eye contact or fidget. Try and avoid doing those things. Try and just be conscious of your body language when you're in the interview. Power poses. There's a great TED talk, some of you might have seen, by a lady called Amy Cuddy, and she talks about power poses, which are poses that you physically do. So one is kind of linking your fingers and putting them behind your back like that with the chest lifted. The other one is the Wonder Woman pose with your hands on your hips. And apparently, if you do these for 2 or 3 minutes, you will feel more confident automatically. Your testosterone levels go up and you can perform better in an interview. And then breathing techniques. Now, I know these days there's any amount of free breathing techniques on YouTube, the 3-minute breathing technique, all these kind of things. You don't need any specific technique. Just taking a few slow, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth will automatically start to relax your nervous system within seconds. And you'll feel less frazzled and more able to concentrate. So, like I said, if you leave yourself that bit of extra time, that's something that you could do while you're sitting having your cup of tea in the cafe next door to where the place is, or you could even go into the bathrooms. I do that. Might not be the place you want to be doing deep breathing, but find a quiet corner somewhere. And they're just all little things that you can do to help to mitigate stress. Dealing with disappointment. Hopefully you won't have to, but if that particular interview, and it is just that one interview, doesn't go your way, it's still all good interview practice. And the more interviews you do, the more confident and relaxed you'll be in interviews. So it's not wasted. Always ask for feedback so that you can do better next time. Now, they don't have to give you feedback, but they pretty much always will. And I strongly recommend you ask for it. Because sometimes you come out of an interview and you think you made a right hames of certain things and you were actually fine with those things. And there might be other things that you're doing that actually are problematic, that you have a complete blind spot and you've no idea you were doing. And you never would unless you asked. Also, you may have done an awful lot better than you think. The feedback they give you might be, actually, you did really, really well. The interviewers were really impressed with you. There was just one other interviewee that had that bit more experience, that few years extra experience in that particular thing. And that's great to know. You know, you didn't do anything wrong. You were a very strong candidate in the running. If you go for the same job tomorrow, you may well get it. But it's just that somebody else slightly pipped you to the post. Otherwise, you're left thinking, you don't know if you did a great interview or, you know, they wouldn't have hired you in a million years. So always ask for feedback. Looking for a job, as you know, can be very frustrating when things aren't happening quickly, when you're not getting that job you want. But looking for the right job is a job in itself. And I know everybody's financial circumstances are different, but if possible, do try and wait for a job till you find a job that feels right for you, and a company that feels right for you, that you're going to want to stay in for a while. And with the job searching, do a little and often. As our previous speaker said, you know, you drive yourself demented if you spend 6 hours a day on job sites. Just pick a few that seem to be the ones that work for you and just do little bits and often. And finally, current unemployment rates, good news. Current unemployment rates are at their lowest in 20 years. So there are a lot of jobs out there. You know, it really is a good time to be looking. And don't settle for less than you want or less than you deserve. So just to sum up, find the job you like and prepare to apply. So find out as much as you can about the role you're applying for. Highlight your relevant skills on your CV. So again, with the CV, you're just going to put down what's relevant. You don't have to put down everything to the year dot. You don't need to go back any more than 10 years if you don't need to. You don't need to put on your leaving cert date, anything. Make sure your CV is well structured. I just had a few notes on CV here as well. Clear to read and highlights relevant skills and experience. So you're going to tailor your CV to each job. Prepare for interview. So really look at what behaviours and competencies the company's looking for and prepare and practice your answers. So that's all I have. So thank you very much. I don't think we've got time for questions.